On April 3, 2026, the media outlet Iran International documented a profound shift in the public sphere of the adversary. Following a public declaration by Donald Trump threatening to bomb the country back to the Stone Age, a wave of fury swept through the Iranian populace. The mainstream press in the West is reporting on this as a successful psychological operation. They are discussing the fear generated by the American commander-in-chief. They are framing the rhetoric as a restoration of ultimate deterrence. That is the illusion. The structural reality we face today is that this rhetoric is not a sign of operational control. It is a symptom of strategic exhaustion. To understand why a threat of total annihilation is actually a confession of vulnerability, we must peel back the first layer of the onion. This is not a conflict of words. It is a conflict of mathematics, geography, and the limits of conventional air power. For decades, the United States military doctrine has been built on the premise of overwhelming aerial supremacy. The belief is that any adversary can be brought to its knees if enough high-explosive ordnance is dropped from the sky. The public is told that the B-1B Lancer bombers and the stealth fighter fleets can erase a nation from the map. That is the broadcast. The physical reality of the Earth dictates otherwise. Trump threatened to bomb Iran into the Stone Age. This was the headline that generated the fury. But the question the official military planners are asking in private is entirely different. How do you bomb a country into the Stone Age when their critical military infrastructure is already buried under thousands of feet of solid stone? The answer is that you cannot. Iran has spent 40 years observing the United States military. They watched the air campaigns in Iraq. They studied the operations in the Balkans. They understood that competing against the United States Air Force in the open sky is a guaranteed path to defeat. Therefore, they moved their center of gravity underground. By targeting the surface infrastructure of Iran, the United States can certainly destroy bridges, power grids, and civilian centers. But the core military architecture, the missile production facilities, the command centers, and the drone assembly lines exist deep within the Zagros Mountains. In this subterranean dark zone, your stealth technology is irrelevant. In this environment, the mathematics of the battlefield have been completely inverted. To understand the tactical failure of the Stone Age threat, you must understand the geography of the Iranian plateau. This is the second layer of the onion. Iran is not a flat desert where targets can be easily identified and eliminated. It is a vast, mountainous fortress. It is 3 times the size of France. It is bordered by jagged peaks and deep valleys. The geography itself is an active combatant in this war. American air doctrine assumes that if you drop a 2,000-pound bomb on a coordinate, the target is neutralized. But geography has a vote. Iranian forces have deployed their solid fuel, road-mobile missile systems inside these mountain corridors. They do not park their assets on open tarmacs. They wait inside the limestone ridges. They receive targeting coordinates. They roll out, they fire, and they retreat into the earth within 12 minutes. The United States is playing a game of high-stakes chess against an opponent that is using the very crust of the earth as a primary shield. When the American bombers enter the airspace, they are not flying over a conventional battlefield. They are flying over a pre-calculated labyrinth. Air superiority is a ghost when the enemy lives inside the mountain. That is not a tactical oversight by Washington. That is a geographical reality that no amount of rhetorical bluster can alter. We must now examine the most catastrophic intelligence failure associated with this rhetoric. The Central Intelligence Agency and the State Department have long operated under a specific clinical assumption. They believed that applying maximum pressure and threatening total destruction would fracture the command structure of the adversary. They anticipated that the civilian population would turn against their leadership out of sheer terror. They modeled their strategy on the hope of internal collapse. The mathematics of human survival do not operate on Western political theories. By threatening to erase the nation, Washington did not dismantle the regime. They fertilized it. The report from April 3rd confirms this precisely. The Stone Age threat drew intense fury from Iranians. Not just the hardliners, not just the military class, but the ordinary citizens. This is the law of unintended consequences in its purest form. A rhetorical escalation designed to break the will of the people instead birthed a unified, nationalistic front. When a superpower threatens to bomb a country of nearly 90 million people into prehistoric conditions, the internal political divisions of that country instantly evaporate. The United States thought they were applying psychological pressure. They actually provided the ultimate unifying mechanism. The Iranian leadership has used the American threats to consolidate power through external conflict. They are using the broadcasted words of the United States president to justify total national mobilization. Washington handed Tehran the exact crisis they needed to legitimize their resistance economy. That is not a psychological victory for the West. That is a generational strategic error. Let us examine the economic paradox of the Stone Age strategy. This is the third layer of our analysis, and it is the layer that dictates the true cost of the conflict. The United States administration is threatening total infrastructural destruction, but the global economy operates as a single, interconnected nervous system. You cannot amputate a major limb without causing the entire body to go into shock. If the United States military were to follow through on the threat and systematically dismantle Iranian infrastructure, Iran would immediately execute its asymmetric response protocols. They would not surrender. They would ensure that the region burns with them. The primary target would not be American aircraft carriers. The primary target would be the desalination plants and the oil processing facilities of the Gulf partner nations. We must look at the asymmetry of vulnerability. Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates are modern, high-tech nations. But their survival depends entirely on centralized, highly exposed industrial nodes. They rely on massive desalination plants to provide fresh water to their populations. Iran possesses thousands of low-flying explosive drones. The cost of a single Shahed drone is approximately $20,000. The cost of a Saudi desalination plant is measured in the billions. If Iran is pushed to the brink of the Stone Age, they will use their $20,000 drones to eliminate the water supply of the Arabian Peninsula. You can survive without electricity for a week. You cannot survive in the desert without water for 3 days. The United States can deploy infinite air power, but they cannot manufacture water for millions of people under fire. This is the deterrence architecture of the 21st century. It is not based on who has the biggest bomb. It is based on who has the most fragile society. When a superpower threatens the total destruction of a major energy-producing region, the war does not just happen in the Middle East. It happens in the bond markets, the global insurance agencies, and the commodity trading floors. This is where we must connect the dots. The rhetoric of total war is a blaring alarm to the maritime insurance companies in London. It sends a very specific message. The Persian Gulf is no longer a viable commercial transit zone. If Washington is promising a campaign of total annihilation, no insurance underwriter will cover a 300-meter supertanker attempting to navigate the Strait of Hormuz. The moment the maritime insurance is withdrawn, the ships stop moving. This brings us to the core of the American domestic vulnerability. The Strait of Hormuz facilitates the transit of 20% of the daily petroleum consumption of the entire world. If the insurance freezes, that 20% vanishes from the market instantly. The global supply drops. The price per barrel surges toward $150. When the global price surges, the price at the local American gas station surges by the exact same amount. Domestic oil producers in the United States will sell their oil at the elevated global market rate. They will not subsidize the American consumer. This is the second-order effect that destroys political campaigns. A president issues a threat of total war on television, and 3 weeks later, the cost of diesel in the American Midwest doubles. The cost of transporting agricultural goods triples. The national inflation data spikes uncontrollably. Geography dictates that American energy independence is a mathematical illusion. The American wallet is permanently tethered to the stability of the Persian Gulf. This brings us to the core strategic paradox of the current conflict. It is a reality that causes immense discomfort in the policy rooms of Washington. The United States and Iran are locked in a violent, rhetorical war. But underneath the surface, they are entirely dependent on each other to survive the political calendar. The administration in Washington is facing a midterm election in November. If gasoline prices reach $7 a gallon, the ruling party will face severe electoral liquidation. They absolutely need Iran to keep the Strait of Hormuz open, just enough to prevent a global macroeconomic depression. On the other side of the water, Tehran is surviving under maximum pressure sanctions. They require the black market sale of their own crude oil to fund their state apparatus. They need the United States Navy to maintain a predictable, managed level of friction rather than an unpredictable total war. This is the mechanics of power. The adversaries are threatening each other with the Stone Age for the cameras. But beneath the surface, they are forced to maintain a fragile, unspoken equilibrium. Neither side can actually afford the execution of their own ultimate threats. They are fighting for leverage, not annihilation. The official broadcasts are designed to distract you. They want you to focus on the anger and the bold statements. They want you to believe that power is measured by the volume of the threat. The structural reality is that the era of absolute American hegemony in the region is being neutralized by the brutal arithmetic of asymmetric warfare. The small and cheap is exhausting the large and expensive. The mountain is absorbing the missile. In the next part of this briefing, we will examine the tactical realities of the interceptor exhaustion currently facing the United States Navy. We will analyze how the petrodollar architecture is quietly fracturing under the pressure of the closed waterways. And we will dissect why the European allies have chosen to step back from the brink of a conflict they know cannot be won from the air. The layers of this strategic standoff run deep, and the consequences will reshape the geopolitical map long after the rhetoric fades. It is a demonstration of geographical ignorance. Now we must examine the tactical rot and the systemic failure of the United States naval and defensive doctrine in the Persian Gulf. The administration in Washington claims that the mission is about re-establishing deterrence. They claim that the threat of overwhelming force will bring the adversary to the negotiating table. But the structural reality in the waters of the Middle East tells a completely different story. It is the story of a global superpower currently absorbing the consequences of a war it was never designed to sustain. Let us look at the mathematics of saturation. This is the core of the Iranian asymmetric strategy. It is the mechanism that renders the threats of the United States obsolete. The United States Navy operates the Aegis combat system. It is a marvel of modern engineering. It is a multi-billion-dollar shield designed to protect carrier strike groups from incoming threats. The public is told that this shield is impenetrable. The public is told that the fleets can operate with total impunity. In the world of physics, an impenetrable shield is a lie. In the theater of strategic realism, a perfect defense is a mathematical impossibility. The Aegis system relies on the Standard Missile family of interceptors. Each of these interceptors is an exquisite piece of technology, and each one costs between $2 million and $4 million. To intercept a threat, you must launch a missile. To intercept a swarm, you must launch a swarm of interceptors. Saturation is not a choice. It is a law of physics. When Iran launches a coordinated wave of 100 drones and low-flying cruise missiles, the defense system must track 100 targets. It must achieve 100 simultaneous radar locks. It must manage 100 terminal engagements. The cost to Iran to launch that swarm is perhaps $2 million. The cost to the United States to intercept it is hundreds of millions of dollars. Even if the success rate of the United States Navy is 99%, the mathematics of the battlefield dictate that one projectile will get through. If that one projectile strikes the radar dome of a guided missile destroyer, the ship is not sunk, but it is blinded. And a blind destroyer in a contested waterway is no longer a strategic asset. It is a $13 billion liability. The United States is burning through years of interceptor production in a matter of weeks. The magazines on the destroyers are finite. They cannot be reloaded at sea in the middle of a combat zone. Once the tubes are empty, the ship must withdraw. We are seeing a strategic inversion unfold in real time. The most expensive military in human history is being bled dry by an adversary using the most cost-effective munitions available. This is not a victory of defense. It is a mathematical liquidation. Now, let us examine the strategic paradox of the Western coalition. The United States requires international legitimacy to sustain an operation of this magnitude. They require partners to share the logistical burden and to project a united front. But the threat to reduce a major energy-producing nation to the Stone Age has had a chilling effect on the allies of Washington. The North Atlantic Treaty Organization is quietly fracturing. The leaders of the European Union understand the geography of the crisis far better than the politicians in Washington. The United States is protected by two massive oceans. If the Middle East descends into total chaos, the United States will suffer an economic recession. But Europe will suffer a civilizational crisis. A total war in the Persian Gulf would trigger a complete halt to energy shipments through the Suez Canal and the Mediterranean Sea. It would trigger a wave of millions of refugees crossing the borders of the European Union. Germany, France, and Spain know that their economies cannot survive a permanent closure of the Strait of Hormuz. Therefore, they are stepping back. The defense ministries in Europe have looked at the American strategy and concluded that it is a suicide operation. France has deployed its own naval assets to the region, but they have explicitly stated they will only protect French-flagged vessels. They will not participate in offensive American operations. Italy and Spain have declined to place their ships under United States command. The United Kingdom remains the closest partner, but even the British government is calculating the cost of an open-ended war. The Royal Navy possesses the specialized mine-clearing capability that the United States desperately needs. But the United Kingdom will not sacrifice its specialized fleet to support a rhetorical strategy of total annihilation. Leverage is not cooperation, and a terrified ally is a useless ally. The reality behind the curtain is that the unified Western Front is dead. It has been replaced by a series of bilateral transactions, and the cost of those transactions is the loss of American diplomatic credibility across the entire European continent. Let us look at the economic heart of this conflict. The news reports focus on the anger of the Iranian population. They speak of the political tensions. But the true battlefield is the global supply chain. The threat to bomb Iran into the Stone Age carries a direct, unavoidable second-order effect. If you destroy the infrastructure of Iran, Iran will destroy the energy infrastructure of the Gulf. We must apply the logic of the cornered animal. If Tehran believes that its absolute survival is at stake, it has no incentive to show restraint. They will target the oil refineries in Saudi Arabia. They will target the natural gas facilities in Qatar. They will target the desalination plants in the United Arab Emirates. When a desalination plant in the desert is taken offline, the capacity to sustain human life does not just stop. It is destroyed. When an oil refinery is set on fire, the energy lifeline of the industrial world is severed. This is not a negotiation. It is an attrition of the global nervous system. The petrodollar is the air that Washington breathes. It is the core mechanism that allows the United States to run a national debt of $34 trillion. But the petrodollar requires two fundamental conditions. Oil must be sold in United States dollars, and the United States must guarantee the absolute security of the nations producing that oil. Right now, the United States cannot guarantee that security. And Iran is preparing to formalize a toll system in the Strait of Hormuz demanding payment in Chinese yuan. This is the endgame of the conflict. If the world no longer needs dollars to purchase its energy, the demand for United States Treasury bonds collapses. If the bond market collapses, the American economy becomes a house of cards. The petrodollar was built on the promise of security. That promise is currently sinking in the Persian Gulf. The American consumer is already seeing the first signs of this collapse at the gasoline pump. Fuel prices are surging, transport costs are rising, inflation is returning with a vengeance. This is where the political calendar collides with the civilizational timeline. The administration in Washington is facing a midterm election in November. The ruling party needs the war to stop before the economy destroys their electoral chances. They are issuing massive threats because they are desperate for a quick resolution. But Tehran is not operating on a political calendar of 2 to 4 years. They are operating on a timeline of decades. They know that they do not need to sink the American fleet to win. They only need to outlast the American political tolerance for economic pain. Every day the war continues, the cost to the United States Treasury increases. Every day the shipping lanes are contested. The petrodollar weakens. Tehran has watched the United States military retreat from its forward positions. The New York Times has reported that United States military personnel are being relocated from their exposed bases in the Middle East to luxury hotels in the European Union. They are conducting their command and control operations remotely. Let the magnitude of that structural shift sink in. American soldiers are managing a live combat operation via video call from hotel rooms in Europe. because the billion-dollar bases they built in the desert are no longer safe from $20,000 drones. This is not the behavior of a superpower in absolute control. It is the language of improvisation under severe duress. The superpower is retreating into a digital bunker. The United States is declaring an intent to destroy a nation. But the foundations of American power are being quietly liquidated by the very mechanics of the war they are fighting. The successor in Iran, Mojtaba Khamenei, is watching the American frustration. He is seeing the exhaustion of the interceptor stockpiles. He is seeing the failure of the maximum pressure campaign. He understands that a threat of total war is the final card of a player who has run out of viable options. He will not surrender. He will wait. He will absorb the damage, and he will continue to turn the geography of the Middle East into a trap for the Western alliance. The mainstream narrative is a distraction. The media wants you to focus on the podiums, the press conferences, and the fiery rhetoric. They want you to debate the morality of the speeches, but the reality is found in the tanker tracking data. It is found in the empty missile tubes of the destroyers. It is found in the rising yields of the global bond markets. The board has shifted. The geography has asserted its absolute dominance. And the official version of the war is entering a state of terminal delusion. The architecture of deterrence has been tested, and it has failed. As we move into the next phase of this conflict, the question is no longer about the survival of Iran. The question is about the structural integrity of the United States. How much of its global financial hegemony is Washington willing to sacrifice to maintain the illusion of military omnipotence? The answer will be found in the coming months as the midterms approach and the financial bills for this conflict finally come due. The world is watching. The allies are recalibrating their positions. And the geography remains, as always, the only god that does not change its mind. Behind the narrative, the structural reality is a complete liquidation of the old order. The official broadcast is an illusion engineered for the masses. Behind the narrative, a permanent structural shift is rewriting the global order. Gain the information advantage, master the strategic reality, and position yourself ahead of the coming reconfiguration.